Officially, the story was one of natural disaster, poor harvests, and unfortunate timing. But decades later, documents and testimonies revealed that policies of the Great Leap Forward, forced collectivization, and disastrous planning had caused the deaths of tens of millions. People starved while officials inflated production numbers to please their superiors. Villages emptied, children wasted away, and in some desperate cases, survivors turned to cannibalism. For years, the scale of the famine was hidden, but historians now believe it was one of the deadliest events in human history, a tragedy not of nature but of politics. The Holodomor in Ukraine, another famine equally shocking, took place in Ukraine during the early 1930s. Known as the Holodomor, it was the result of Stalin's forced collectivization policies. Grain was seized from peasants, leaving them without food, even as harvests were sent abroad. Entire villages starved, and strict laws made even taking a few stalks of wheat punishable by death. Eyewitness accounts describe fields full of grain guarded by soldiers while families died of hunger nearby. Millions perished, and for decades, the Soviet Union denied the famine's existence. Only in recent years has the truth been acknowledged in full. King Leopold's Congo. During the colonization of Africa, European powers carved up entire regions with no regard for the people living there. In the Congo, under the rule of King Leopold II of Belgium, millions of Africans were forced to harvest rubber under brutal conditions. Those who failed to meet quotas often faced mutilation, their hands cut off as punishment. Families were torn apart, villages destroyed, and an entire region was bled dry for profit. Reports of the atrocities eventually reached Europe, but for years they were hidden under the guise of progress and civilization. The shocking truth is that an estimated 10 million people died during this period, making it one of the greatest crimes of the colonial era. MKUltra and mind control. After the Second World War, the world entered a new age, one marked by both progress and paranoia. The Cold War became a battle not only of armies but of minds. Behind closed doors, governments carried out experiments that remain shocking even decades later. The CIA ran programs like MKUltra, where unwitting people were subjected to mind control experiments using drugs such as LSD. Some subjects were permanently scarred, their lives ruined, in the pursuit of controlling the human mind. These experiments were hidden from the public for years, and when exposed, they revealed a disturbing truth about how far institutions would go in the name of power. The Soviet gulags. The Soviet Union carried its own secrets. During the construction of massive projects like the White Sea Canal, thousands of political prisoners were forced to work under brutal conditions in gulags. Starvation, disease, and exhaustion killed countless people. The canal was completed, but at a human cost so immense it could never be justified. Official records minimized the suffering, yet the graves of prisoners stretched for miles. The shocking fact is that monuments of progress were often built on the corpses of those silenced by history. Nuclear testing in the Pacific. Nuclear testing during the 20th century also left scars hidden from the public eye. On remote islands in the Pacific, nuclear bombs were detonated, shattering coral reefs, poisoning the land, and displacing entire populations. In places like Bikini Atoll, residents were told they could return after testing, only to find their homes contaminated for generations. Soldiers were often stationed nearby without proper protection, exposed to radiation that shortened their lives. The age of the atom brought not only power but also invisible wounds that stretched far beyond the test sites. The Chernobyl disaster in 1986, the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Soviet Union released massive amounts of radiation into the environment. Entire towns were evacuated, never to be inhabited again. The disaster was initially concealed by authorities, putting more people at risk. Even today, the area remains contaminated, a haunting reminder of how human error and secrecy can magnify catastrophe. The shocking fact is that the radiation spread across Europe, touching lives far beyond the borders of the Soviet Union, a silent cloud that revealed itself only through illness and contamination. The Radium Girls' corporate history holds its own shocking truths. In the early 20th century, workers in American factories painting glow-in-the-dark dials on watches used paint containing radium. Women, told the substance was harmless, often licked their brushes to create fine points. Soon they began suffering from severe illnesses, their bones breaking and jaws disintegrating from radiation poisoning. The companies denied responsibility, and many workers died before justice was acknowledged. These women became known as the Radium Girls, and their tragedy exposed the dangers of unchecked industry. Agent Orange in Vietnam history is also filled with shocking betrayals. During the Vietnam War, chemical weapons like Agent Orange were used to destroy forests and crops. This herbicide caused lasting damage not only to the environment but to the health of millions of people. Children were born with birth defects, and veterans carried illnesses for decades. Governments downplayed the effects, but the truth emerged slowly, revealing the immense suffering caused by one of the most destructive chemicals used in modern warfare. The Bhopal gas tragedy. Even in times of peace, shocking events reshaped societies. In 1984, a gas leak at a pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, released toxic chemicals that killed thousands overnight and injured countless more. The aftermath left entire neighborhoods poisoned, water contaminated, and generations affected. The company responsible minimized the disaster, and survivors struggled for justice for decades. It remains one of the deadliest industrial accidents in history, a reminder that negligence can be as destructive as war. Foot binding in China. Shocking facts also lie hidden in the history of culture and tradition. In some societies, practices were carried out for centuries that now appear unthinkable. Foot binding in China, which broke and reshaped the feet of young girls, was considered a sign of beauty and status. Yet it left women crippled for life, their bones twisted in ways that caused constant pain. Families embraced the practice for generations, without questioning the suffering it caused. The shocking reality is that culture can normalize cruelty, making it invisible to those who live within it. Public executions as entertainment. Public executions, once common across Europe and Asia, were treated as entertainment. Crowds gathered as people were hanged, burned, or beheaded. Vendors sold food, children laughed, and entire communities turned violence into spectacle. The shocking fact is that what we now see as barbaric was once a festive gathering, a normal part of public life. Only recently did societies begin to reject such displays of death as unacceptable. Watergate and political scandals. Political power often hides its darkest truths. Richard Nixon's Watergate scandal is remembered as a story of corruption and cover-up, but few realize how close it brought the United States to a constitutional crisis. Wiretaps, secret payments, and illegal operations revealed a network of abuses of power. The shocking truth was not only in the crimes themselves, but in how long they remained hidden, and how fragile the balance of democracy can be when leaders place themselves above the law. The Dirty War in Argentina and South America, the reign of dictators brought shocking brutality to entire nations. In Argentina during the 1970s, thousands of people were abducted, tortured, and killed in what became known as the Dirty War. Many simply disappeared, their bodies never found. Mothers marched in public squares carrying photos of their missing children, demanding answers. Decades later, the truth continues to emerge, with secret prisons, stolen babies, and government lies revealed piece by piece. Gladiators of Rome. The shocking facts of history are not limited to politics, war, or science. Even sports carry hidden stories. In ancient Rome, gladiator fights were not always to the death, but when they were, the violence was staged as entertainment for crowds of thousands. Fighters were often slaves, prisoners, or condemned criminals forced into battle. Victories could bring fame, but more often, the arena was a place of blood and suffering. The shocking reality is that for centuries, mass killings were celebrated as public spectacle, normalized as amusement. The Tunguska event. Natural history also holds shocks. In 1908, an explosion leveled 800 square miles of forest in Siberia, flattening trees for miles around. Known as the Tunguska event, it was likely caused by a meteor exploding in the atmosphere. No city stood nearby, but if it had struck over Europe or Asia, millions could have died. The shocking truth is that Earth remains vulnerable to cosmic events, and our survival can depend on chance. The Aral Sea disaster. Human ambition has often collided with nature in disastrous ways. The Aral Sea, once one of the largest lakes in the world, shrank dramatically in the 20th century when rivers feeding it were diverted for irrigation. Entire fishing communities were destroyed, the local climate changed, and toxic dust storms rose from the dry lakebed. What was once a thriving ecosystem became a wasteland. The shocking truth is that human projects can alter geography on a scale as destructive as natural disasters. The dark origins of fairy tales. Even literature carries hidden truths. Many fairy tales we know today were once far darker. The original versions collected by the Brothers Grimm often contained brutal punishments, cannibalism, and violence. In one version of Cinderella, birds peck out the stepsister's eyes. These tales, softened for modern children, originally reflected the harshness of life in earlier centuries. The shocking fact is that the stories meant to entertain and instruct were often rooted in fear and cruelty. Toxic paints of Renaissance art. Art too has shocking origins. Some of the paints used by Renaissance masters were made with toxic substances like lead, mercury, or ground-up mummies imported from Egypt. The beauty of their works came at the cost of exposure to poisons, slowly harming the artists themselves. Even today, scientists studying old paintings must take precautions, aware that masterpieces may carry deadly materials within their pigments. Apartheid in South Africa. In South Africa, the system of apartheid exposed the shocking cruelty of legalized segregation. Millions of people were forced into separate areas, denied basic rights, and subjected to daily humiliation. Protests were met with violence, and opponents were jailed or killed. For decades, the world turned a blind eye, trading with the regime despite its abuses. Only immense pressure and sacrifice eventually broke the system. The shocking reality is that apartheid was not ancient history but ended within living memory, a reminder that injustice can survive when it is ignored. The Rwandan genocide in Rwanda in 1994, a genocide unfolded in which nearly 1 million people were killed in a matter of months. Neighbors turned on neighbors, families were slaughtered, and the world stood by for too long before intervening. The shocking truth is that despite the lessons of the Holocaust, humanity once again allowed mass killings to occur in plain sight. The Srebrenica massacre. The persistence of genocide into modern times continues to shock the conscience. In Bosnia during the 1990s, the massacre at Srebrenica saw more than 8,000 men and boys killed in a matter of days. Families were torn apart, and the event unfolded in full view of the world. The shocking fact is that the promises of never again after World War II were broken repeatedly, as violence continued in new forms. The Challenger disaster. Technological disasters revealed the dangers of ambition unchecked by caution. The Challenger space shuttle, launched in 1986, exploded just over a minute into its flight, killing all 7 crew members. Investigations revealed that engineers had warned of faulty O-ring seals, but their concerns were ignored under pressure to maintain schedules. The shocking fact is that the disaster was preventable, a tragedy caused not by chance but by the silencing of critical voices. The Columbia disaster in 2003, the Columbia shuttle disintegrated during re-entry, killing all 7 astronauts. Foam insulation that broke off during launch had damaged the wing, a problem known but not fully addressed. Once again, warnings were ignored, and lives were lost. The shocking truth is that progress in space exploration has always carried risks magnified by human error as much as by nature. The thalidomide tragedy in medicine, tragedies unfolded even as treatments advanced. The thalidomide disaster of the 1950s and 1960s saw a drug marketed to pregnant women as safe for morning sickness. In reality, it caused severe birth defects in thousands of children. Families were devastated, and it took years before regulations caught up with the scale of the problem. The shocking fact is that corporate profit and weak oversight can turn medicine into a source of harm rather than healing. The Tuskegee study governments too conducted experiments on their own citizens without consent.